Good evening, everyone. And I want to welcome you to our Bookaccino Live book group program this evening that we are all looking forward to. I'm Carol Fitzgerald from Reading Group Guides, a website from the Book Report Network, and I'm the host of the Book Reporter Talks To video podcast series. I want to welcome you to tonight's event. Our guest this evening is Paula Hawkins, and we will be talking about her latest thriller, The Blue Hour. It's a Book Reporter Bets On selection, and it's a book that I loved. As soon as I started reading it, I just sat down and I couldn't stop because I was dying to see what she was going to do with these characters and how she was going to be developing the story. It was one of my bets on selections, and I'm going to tell you that when I did this as a bets on, what I said about it. At many points, the story is chilling, and even floating on my pool raft this summer as I read it, I felt the house's isolation from the book. Yes, the remarks that there are shades of Patricia Highsmith here are not unfounded. The book is dark and it's smart. And I've been trapped on similar islands in books before, but here the creepy vibe is on high to a whole different level. So let me go over what tonight's format is going to be. We're going to start by me noting that we are assuming that everyone has read the book. This is not the kind of place where you just show up with the wine and, hanging out with your friends. We are going to be talking spoilers, so just keep that in the back of your mind. I'm going to start with a discussion with Paula, and one of our readers is then going to join us, and she will be talking live with some questions about the Blue Hour. And then I'm going to share some questions from some of our readers who are a little bit more camera shy. So we have a big evening planned, and then we're going to go to questions from the audience. So once again, if you have questions for Paula, we ask that you drop them into the Q&A area, not into the chat, so that Tom Donadio, who is our amazing voice of God, will be able to find them later on, and we'll be able to make sure that we get through as many as we can this evening. And with that housekeeping behind us, let's welcome Paula to the stage.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening. And Paula's a real trooper, folks. It's 1 a.m. where she is, and she has joined us. And I think that deserves a round of applause from all of us. Trust me, trust me, trust me. It's so great to see you again. I so enjoyed our chat when your book first came out.
Me too. It's really great to be here. Thank you so much for having me here.
So I believe I remember you saying that you started to think about the Blue Hour where you're on a vacation. And I think that everybody always wants to know, gee, where did the authors first start the idea for the book? So if you could do that setup for us, I'd love for you to share it with the audience.
Yeah, I was actually in France. It was years ago, as usual. What tends to happen with me is I have an idea and I think about it for a really long time before I actually get down to writing it. So this was like 2017, I think maybe 2018, and I was in France, on the coast of Brittany, which is a coastline that has a lot of these little tidal islands, so islands that are cut off only when the tide is high, when the tide is in. And I was walking out on the sands, looking up at one particular little island, and it just had a single house on it. And I kind of felt all the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It was just this beautiful, isolated, perfect location for a novel. Um, and I knew kind of straight away I wanted to do something with that. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that, but I knew there was something about that. It had so much possibility in that, the beauty of the location and the isolation, but that idea that you might get trapped there or you might need to get to it and not be able to. I could immediately see that that was going to be a gift of a location. And as I say, it was years until I found the right person to live in the single house because I was really intrigued by the kind of person who might decide to go and live somewhere where they're going to be stuck for sort of 12 hours a day. So I had to get the right character to go and live there.
So you never went out to an island that was like that. You have no interest in going out to a place and just getting trapped for 12 hours a day.
I mean, I kind of can enjoy the fantasy of it, but I'm pretty sure that I would not enjoy it and in reality. I like in theory, yes. That kind of solitude is quite alluring sometimes, but I think it is very theoretical.
I also feel like 12 could turn into 24. Like I would be out there
Hmm.
and think, what if the road doesn't come back? Like what would happen
What if
then?
there's a storm? What if, yeah,
Yeah, that what
exactly,
if the road
exactly.
washes out? So in the
Yeah.
opening page, we learn that one of the art pieces called Division 2 from Vanessa Chapman must be removed from an exhibit as it contains a human bone. So where did the inspiration for that plot idea come from?
I mean, that was a thing that sort of built more gradually. I knew that, so I had this location, I knew this tidal island that I wanted to write about, and I eventually came up with the idea that the person who would live there would be an artist because she'd be drawn there by the solitude, by the isolation, but also by the beauty of she'd be inspired by this landscape. This is a place she could really work. And I had this idea that I wanted her to make things. She'd be a painter, but she also would make things out of things that she found and things that she gathered and picked up on the beach and that kind of thing. And when I sort of was thinking about the sorts of things that you would gather, and I started thinking about animal bones, and then immediately my mind was thinking, it's like, oh, right, a bone, that's a way in to a mystery, isn't it? If there's a bone there, if there's a bone that isn't an animal bone, but a human one. You've immediately got something there to work with. So it was one of those things that it wasn't the first idea, but it was the idea that unlocked the sort of potential of the thriller, sort of the crime side of the novel, because I could find my little mystery just in something that maybe she picked up or maybe she knew where it came from. We don't really know. That's the mystery of the novel.
Yeah, we really are not quite sure what is going on. Was she
Hmm.
collecting bones? Was she boiling people? What was going on at that point? Your love of art definitely comes through in the book. It definitely
Hmm.
appreciation of it, whatever. Do you collect? Do you go to museums? What do you do?
Yeah, I do. I love going to art museums. I love going to galleries. I do buy little. I have quite a few pieces. And it's just one of those things that has built up more and more as I wasn't particularly into art when I was younger, but as an older person, I'm very old now. It is one of those things that I really enjoy, and I find it really inspirational. And it was, in fact, going to a gallery not far from my flat here in London, to see the work of the American abstract expressionist Lee Krasner. That was something that really got me thinking. There was a big exhibition of her work here before I started writing this novel, and she was somebody who made these big paintings and then ripped them up because she didn't like what she'd done and then made something out of the pieces. And that was very inspirational because I started thinking about that idea of making things out of something that you've discarded or something that you found or something that is broken to you. And that became quite a big theme in the novel. And was actually also important for me because at that point, I was in the process of abandoning a piece of work that hadn't been working out for me, and I was trying to salvage things from it too. So yeah, going to exhibitions and studying the work of artists one of the really great pleasures of writing this book, and I did love writing this book. But I could really immerse myself in artists' lives and the way they think about how they talk about their work and how they approach things and the similarities and differences between writers and visual artists. That was all fun for me.
I was also thinking at the Louvre the other day of the heist and how those
Mm,
people, I honestly and truly, watching the news about that, cannot believe what they pulled off.
crazy.
What,
I mean, they just
how
put a big ladder up for just, I mean, what?
put up a ladder? You honestly, if you wrote this, your
I
editor
know.
would
Everyone would
say,
go, oh, it'd be ridiculous. Yeah.
that's absolutely, and then jump on the motorcycles and ride away with everything. The precision. You think the Thomas Crown affair is good until you watch this, and then you're just
Yeah.
like, this is. And I know that one of my friends, Jonathan, had written a book about a heist at the Louvre, and he says it wasn't me. I swear, I had nothing to do with this. I wasn't even trying it as an idea. So, you know, Vanessa and Grace, when she first came into urgent care, let's talk about them. That's where they first meet each other.
Yeah.
And let's talk about making their connection because I feel like with Grace being a doctor, Vanessa's got somebody that she would trust. She trust her, like what was going on in the relationship between the two of them. So, did that have something to do with your feelings about the two
Yeah,
characters?
I mean that is that I think one of the interesting thing about their relationship is it's a very complex relationship and the power dynamic kind of shifts between them or at different points all the way through the novel. But that first meeting is a point where Vanessa goes in with her broken wrist and she goes to a doctor and she trusts this woman because you do, because that's what happens when you go to a doctor and the doctor takes care of you. And this doctor actually offers to help her because of the the particular position, situation of where she lives and everything. She can't drive now; she's hurt her arm, and so that there's immediately a kind of trust there that perhaps wouldn't have existed if they hadn't been in that particular situation. So it's one of those accidental meetings that leads you down a particular path. And then because these women are very different, they wouldn't have been friends under probably other circumstances, but they're both quite isolated. They live in this place where you don't meet that many people. And they just and Vanessa's one of these people who kind of will welcome anyone at first, she's just one of those people. And Grace is absolutely fascinated immediately because she doesn't make friends easily. She doesn't warm to people or have people warm to her. So the second that happens, it's this great thing for her. And also she has a particular history with the island, and so she's very intrigued by this whole situation. But that position of there's an implicit trust there from the word go, and that is something that then obviously grows and then erodes and is at some points completely shattered throughout the novel. But I think yeah, it's very important. The way that they meet kind of determines the opening part at least of that relationship.
Yeah, there's something there that will have to be broken later because
Yeah.
it's already been there and been together. So then we've got James Becker from the Fairburn Foundation, who is charged with figuring out what happened to the sculpture and what may be missing from the collection. So let's talk about him and what the inspiration was for him, because he has his own vibe to the whole thing of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, because I think what I wanted to do was have this. I always like to write about an outsider. There's a number of outsiders here. Obviously, Grace is one, but Becker's this man, James Becker, who loves Vanessa's art. He's kind of an expert on Vanessa's art, but he's a real outsider in the art world because he doesn't come from a very privileged background. And it is still a situation in Britain that the art world tends to be quite posh as people from quite moneyed backgrounds. He doesn't come from that. He's really worked to get where he is, and that's given him a particular outlook. He feels out of place, but at the same time, he feels kind of superior to a lot of these people because he did actually do the work to get here. He really knows what he's talking about. So he has got a slightly interesting relationship. He also has this almost like a kind of a love affair with Vanessa's work. He has this thing that comes from his background, from his childhood. She's this idealized person to him. So he's by no means a kind of objective onlooker. And
Mhm.
of course, he's entangled in this complicated love triangle at the place where he works, where his wife is now, is the former girlfriend of the man he works for. So he's got lots of different things going on there.
Lots of stuff
And
going
I
on.
think this is what makes he maybe isn't he's easily distracted. He's maybe not keeping his eye on the ball all the time. So
Mhm.
when he goes and meets Grace, he sees one thing and he maybe doesn't see what he ought to. It takes him a while for the scales to fall and for him to really see what's in front of him.
And he's also
Which is a big, yeah, theme of the whole book is, how we perceive what's in front of us and how we interpret those things.
And he's also getting out to this island that he's going to be cut off from in 12 hours. So you've
Yeah,
got to get out, get the story, him looking at your watch. What is going to happen to me? Do I want to stay
exactly.
here? Who is this person? She's a little
Yeah.
crazy, but like, this is the only person I've got right now, da da da
Yeah.
da da. So the author's writing process is always as of interest. And portions of Vanessa's diary appear throughout the book. Were those always there? Were those something you added as time was going on?
Um, I can't even, yeah, now I can't exactly remember the point at which I decided to include those, but I did write them separately. So I sort of wrote bits and then I went off and actually ended up writing a huge section of diary. Most of which didn't actually end up in the book, but it gave me a really good opportunity to really get in Vanessa's head and see where she was at various points. And so I just enjoyed myself like going through imagining where she'd be at various points and in her life and in her career and blah blah blah. And then later on I kind of took the bits that I felt were the most, the really key bits, the bits I really wanted the reader to see into her thought processes and her feelings, and I could drop those in. Obviously I didn't I was I messed around with it because I didn't give you a date. So we don't really know where all these bits and pieces come from. She was the slightly disorganized woman. So we know we get these glimpses and you can sort of piece together where they come from, but sometimes they you might be misled. But it was a because Vanessa is never there in the book. She's
Right,
already dead when the book opens.
right,
This
right.
was a way of letting the reader really hear her voice and get a direct introduction to her because we hear lots about her from other people, but this is a way to meet her personally, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's you have pieces of the diary that you get rid of, and then you say later, oh wait, I might need that to bring it back. And
Hmm.
then what do your papers look like afterwards? Like what are the papers of Paula Hawkins after she finishes the book? Do you have big boxes of things or is it all on your computer or what do you do?
I mean, I do tend to print everything out and make notes on it, but then I get rid of that eventually. So I'm afraid I'm not going to be one of those people with like an impeccable archive. There's lots of drafts on the computer, but I sort of wish I was one of those people who kept everything. But God, there's not that much storage, is there? So yeah, there's it's I'm not very organized myself, actually. That is the answer. Yeah.
Well, I do have one author friend who's very a bestseller author, and she says, I have one manuscript that has a note on top. Do not publish, even when I'm dead, even if you're offered a lot of money. Do not do anything with this. It is just here. So I remember where I was at one point. And it's very funny because a lot of times it's like, oh, look at this fabulous thing that I found. And it's like, no, 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 no. I
No.
tossed that. No, 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 no. That's not a story I want to be associated with. So
Exactly.
we have Debbie Moore, who's joining us this evening. She's from Syracuse. Debbie has been with us for most of our events. She's from Syracuse, New York. Should definitely say that. Debbie always has great questions, so I'll let her take it away.
Thanks. Hi, Paula. It's really
Hi.
nice to meet you. I really loved aspects of this book, and I think some of my questions are kind of follow-ups to Carol's questions, although I didn't know what she was going to ask you when I wrote these questions. So, but I loved a paragraph that you had toward the beginning of your book on pages 60 and 61 in the copy I had, where I think you're describing maybe your love for art because you say art is a legacy, it is solace, it soothes, consoles, arouses. It's work, it's what you do all day, it's how you work things out, how you understand the world. It's the opportunity to start over, to shed your skin, to take revenge, to fall in love, to be good, to live long. I mean, I just loved that paragraph. I mean, it's so like described art so well. Did you start with that idea? Does that come from your love of art as a basis for your story, or did you start with the individual characters and get around to the art piece?
I mean, I started with the location and the character, but I did have to really think about the thing with the cat when I think about a character, I do tend to spend a lot of time thinking about what kind of person they are and who they are and how they're going to respond to things. And that little bit that you read is Vanessa talking about art. It's a bit from an interview that she gave, I think, is that when she said that all those things that she says and they're being remembered by someone else. And partly that's the way I feel about art. But so it's one of those nice points where my feelings and the character's feelings intersect. That I'm not one is not one's characters, but there are usually parts of you in them. And I did have to think very much about how she would feel about it, what was important to her, what why does she love it? Why do we all love it? And
Mhm.
then so that those were the kind of things that I was thinking, what are all the ways that art, any kind of art, not necessarily visual art, but books or wherever, enrich our lives, and why is it that we love them it so much, and what is it we get out of things again and again and again out of a piece of music or what have you. And so that was kind of where that paragraph from, but I want came from, and I wanted that feeling to kind of run through the book, particularly the feeling of it's like what we leave behind as well as
Mhm.
just what occupies our day to day. It can be, what you do all day, but it can also be a bigger part of your life and a part of your legacy.
Do you write each character's story completely and then combine them, or do you write pieces of their stories as the story develops?
I write pieces as the story develops. I mean, I think it's maybe different for every book because some books are they do seem more separate, but definitely in this one, everyone was kind of emerging gradually as I went through the story. I was kind of figuring out who they were and how they related to each other and where they'd come from. And maybe you might spend some time with one of the characters, like I did with Vanessa with her diaries, for longer. But generally, um, I was kind of discovering more and more about them as I was getting more further and further into the novel.
Yeah, this, you know, when I was reading this, I was thinking, I wondered, you know, how do you keep track of where all these people are so that they don't meet up when they shouldn't meet up? You know, it's like,
There is a point sort of about, I don't know, like maybe when I'm about halfway through the novel where I have to stop and then I put the sort of post-its on a wall kind of thing. So I can see, and I think they were color coded for character in this instance. So I could see where everyone was. And I could see if someone had sort of disappeared for a long time and we hadn't heard from them. And do we need to hear that voice again? And because there is a point at which you need to see like the shape of the whole thing. And it is hard to keep that in your head when you're going line by line. And sometimes I can't do that at the beginning because I don't kind of know where I am yet. But halfway through, I'm like, okay, I need to see the shape of what this thing is now.
which character was the most difficult to write, and which one was the easiest to write?
And I think Grace is probably the most difficult because she is tricky and she doesn't know herself all that well. I don't think she's the kind of person who doesn't always understand herself. She doesn't understand her own motivation sometimes. So it was hard to get, she's quite a painful character to her skin is quite painful to live in, I think. Poor woman.
Mhm.
Well, poor woman. Anyway, I mean, I do have sympathy for them even when they're terrible. So, I mean, there are parts about her. There are even, there are moments when I understand her and moments when I don't, but she was quite difficult to get to. I mean, the most fun was definitely Emmeline, who's the really, really unpleasant older woman who's Helen's mother-in-law, because she's just so straight and nasty. And so those characters are always fun when they're just like really terrible. You can kind of go to town on those kind of villains. So she was straightforward. But I mean, I loved Becca. I don't often write um well, I do write men, but I don't. I think he's probably one of the better men I've written. He's not perfect, but he's quite a good man, and I did love him. So, yeah.
Thanks. I really enjoyed the story. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Debbie, thank you as always for being part of this evening. So next, I've got a question from Patty Bullis from Macomb, Michigan. And she wrote and she shared this. Hi, and oh my, I just finished this book. I could not put it down. I love the cover. A few people passed by me in the Detroit airport that told me they had read the book, and I could see by their faces that I was in for a treat. I was wondering about the title of the book. Could Paula elaborate more on it? She also shares that she was thinking it was a reference to the color blue also as an artist. So what is also the blue hour? So
Yeah, I mean, the blue hour is that time of day when, I mean, it usually refers to the evening, but it's dawn as well. Dawn and dusk. It's when the sun is kind of gone, it has set or hasn't risen yet. But there's that kind of blue light in the sky. There is a particular like there are scientific terms and scientific rationales, which I won't try and explain here, but it's that beautiful blue light that you get in the sky. But the interesting thing about it is it's a time when, well, it's a time when kind of energy starts to shift, when animals start moving around, when predators come out, that kind of thing. And it's a time when it's quite easy to mistake one thing for another, to see in that half light, to think you see one thing and actually to see something else. And one of the characters says, to mistake a wolf for a dog. So it's that kind of idea of seeing an enemy where there might actually be a friend or vice versa. So there's a nice kind of artistic side to that idea. The blue hour is a time that artists love to paint, photographers particularly love the blue hour. But there's also there's that idea of like not quite seeing the truth of something, that idea where that time where you might be mistaken. And it's also a time at which several key incidents in the book take place. So there's all that kind of stuff going on. But it wasn't the original title of the novel.
Mhm.
I had another title, which I'm not going to tell you because I might use it another time, but it was rejected. So I had a different working title all the way through, and then there was a lot of like good toing and froing, and then I was like, oh, actually, this is pretty perfect, and I'm very happy with it now.
It really is a fabulous title for the book. Is that different from the Golden Hour? Is the Golden Hour?
Yes.
It's different.
So
And
the
what's
golden hour is kind of more when the sun is still in the sky. It's more that kind of,
okay.
the sun is still up. This is the sun is gone, but the light remains, and it's that gorgeous kind of blue light that you
Mhm.
get. And the further north you are in the summer, at least, the longer that time goes on, you get that big time. It's not just an hour. There's more of that time, and it's that sort of twilighty time, but before it actually gets dark, there's still that lovely airy light in the sky.
The Golden Hour used to be when I worked at the magazine. They used to like to shoot during the Golden Hour.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Everyone looks good at golden hour. Yeah.
Everybody looks good. And the golden hour is actually in the morning as well. So you used to shoot in
Yeah.
the morning and you'd shoot at night. And in between it was, I don't know, don't go different from don't sit out too much in the sun. So you look different in the pictures. But other than that, go do your own thing. Something like that. Um, Gail Mayfield from Burnsville, Minnesota has some questions. First, the Blue Hour characters have lengthy backstories. How do characters' present situations and their backstories coalesce as you write? Which comes first, the backstory or their present story?
That's a really interesting question because I love backstory. I love a good origin story. But I generally think of a person in the moment and then I think to myself, okay, now why are they like this? So I'd have, for example, Grace, and I'm thinking of this woman who doesn't make friends very well, who's very isolated. And then I'm thinking to myself, so, okay, why is she like this? Where did she come from? What happened to her? In the years leading up to this point to make her this particular way? Is it some big trauma, or is it just some minor thing, or what has derailed her? So that, and similarly with Vanessa, I think I thought of this artist working on the island, and I knew she would have come there because she was drawn by the place. But I also thought, but also maybe she's running away from something. Now, what is she running away from? So she's abandoned her useless, unfaithful husband, and so that it's that kind of thing. I'll think of a person and then try and imagine why they might have these particular traits that I'm interested in. There'll be some particular aspect of their character that really intrigues me, and then I have to go back and wonder why they ended up there, which is always a lot of fun for me. And maybe not all aspects of their backstory will make it into the novel, but you really understand someone when you kind of understand where they came from, and it's much easier to sympathize with them, even if they do terrible things, if you kind of get why they've ended up there.
Yeah, why are they there? What part of their childhood or whatever, something that happened to them somewhere along the way, even if it doesn't end up
Yeah,
on the page, it helps you
yeah,
create the character.
yeah,
She also
definitely.
says, I was totally intrigued with all the detail, the characters and physical environment of the book, and read the book twice. The environment is harsh and creates anxiety for the characters. How do you gather all their anxiety about the tide times, wind, and rain? Because it all comes across on the page.
Yeah, I mean that setting was kind of a gift because it's you kind of have this feeling of the clock is ticking all the time because the tide's coming in, the tide's coming out. Where are we? And that's it kind of makes you feel immediately anxious, like God, what have we got time to do this? Where are we going to be? So that setting was a real gift. And then as I said earlier, that the actual island that was the inspiration was in France, but I moved this island right up to Scotland, where on the west coast in winter it's quite stormy. It gets dark very early. You can have these big storms. The sea can be quite terrifying. So again, that adds a whole load more kind of anxiety and tension into the story because most of this happens in the winter, and so there's this constant feeling of the light is leaving you very quickly, or the tide is coming in. The sort of the environment is slightly working against you all the time, which manages to help keep this air. Yeah, everyone's kind of on edge. Everyone's anxious. Everyone's a bit worried about what's going to happen.
Okay.
Are they going to be where they need to be in time? Are they going to escape this place in time?
The idea of rereading a book, it actually came up today in an article I was reading from someone who used to review for the New York Times. And she said she used to read every book she reviewed twice.
Oh,
First for
wow.
the story, and then she'd read it again to go through her notes because she felt a
Mm,
very big obligation that
mm,
you don't want to just destroy somebody's work. You want to come
mm.
out and figure out what was in this story to be telling the story. And she's actually said she doesn't like reviewing because you're critiquing somebody's work that they've worked years on, and you have like paragraphs to be able to do it.
Yeah.
But she was talking about reading twice because sometimes you go back and you pick up a nuance later on that you might have missed, or especially in a thriller, you're going to miss the buildup of the story. And I think what the reader says is so intriguing about going back again and saying, what did I see? What did I do? What was going on in the book? We don't take the time to do that enough. But when you're really thinking
No.
about what did the author do?
I'm really impressed by that reviewer because I sometimes feel that I think a lot of book reviewers don't have the luxury of that time. But I think that shows that's wonderful that you read it twice because you are probably good. If you're reading a lot and having to read it fast, you're going to miss things. I think, particularly as a thriller writer, I think I want the reader to want to go back and see what they missed because
Mhm.
I want to put things in early on that might not be obvious to you, but when you look back on them, you're like, oh, she was kind of pointing me in this direction. She was kind of saying, you want to watch this or you want to pay attention to that early on. But you just want to drop in those moments. So I love rereading things. It's one of the things I do if I'm like stuck and I'm feeling like I'm not getting on very well with my writing. I'll go back and read books that I've really loved to sort of remind me what it is that I've loved about them and what it is I want to do, kind of thing. But yes, I think it's a wonderful thing when a reader goes back and starts. You start to get a different understanding. And I think it's very instructive, particularly if you're interested in writing yourself, to see how people have constructed that. And I think in a thriller, you should be able to go back and find these little pointers that were there all along that were kind of telling you this something bad is coming now, pointing you in the right direction, but hopefully not too obviously.
Anybody who says they want to be a writer, everybody says go read. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you think about reading and reading a book again, and this woman was saying she only had 5 days. She'd get a book, she'd get an assignment, she had to read, reread, 5 days, done. That is
Yeah,
really hard to do. And she says she doesn't want to be
it
reading
is.
like that anymore. And also, when she said that thing about I'm holding somebody's career in their hands in a lot of ways. And
Mm,
sometimes you read a review and you're like, you are so far off on this, like, what you're saying, but it's there, it's written.
yeah,
This reason I
yeah.
love having these discussions after the book's been out a while, so we can actually get into what happened. This same reader was asking also, Grace Haskell appears as a sympathetic character early in the book. However, the reader soon glimpses a more complicated personality. How do you write for the reader to see Grace and characters like James Baker that don't see them the same way? Like you're not seeing everybody, you're going to write from two different sides. You're going to be doing things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I always want to. I think well, what I tend to do is I'll introduce character and give the reader a particular view of somebody. And then I'll slowly be maybe undermining that view or reinforcing that view or giving them just a slightly, that kind of, well, you could think about it this way. Or if you look at them from this angle, I think you want to give people that almost like a real experience of meeting someone. You meet someone, you get an impression, and then you meet them a second time and think, oh, maybe I wasn't right about that. Or you hear about them from someone else and you're like, oh, that's not what I thought.
Mhm.
And so you have, like when Becca meets Grace and he kind of dismisses her straight away. He's like, oh, she's ugly. He's disappointed because he was imagining she was going to be a beauty. And it's this very like superficial. I mean, it tells us more about Becca than it maybe does about Grace. But in that moment, you get a kind of glimpse. And then he kind of acknowledges himself that that wasn't a very kind thing to think. But he's already kind of dismissed her as a nobody
Mhm.
straight away, and he's going to come to regret that later on, isn't he?
Mhm.
So I think those are the kind of interesting things you can do. You give somebody, the reader, a direct look or a glimpse through somebody else's eyes of someone, and then let them start to make up their own mind about what they really think the truth of that person is. And that, for me, is the way I like to build character for the reader, to let them kind of come into the story themselves and start figuring out what they think.
Yeah, they're going to see it from somebody else's point of view. Like, what is he thinking
Mm.
about? Or wait, I was thinking something
Yeah.
completely differently.
And you have to think like, what's his agenda or why is he thinking it this way? So yeah, you've got to get involved in the story, I think.
you got to sit there and plan the story a lot. Well, I thank that reader for a question. And now we're going to go to Vicky Fout, who's from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And she said, did you consider different endings for the book? And if so, what were they? And why did you decide on the one you chose?
Mhm. I really struggled with to write that ending because it was a hard ending to write. And yeah, so there were alternatives, but I don't think none of them seemed to quite ring true. I felt there was a sort of inevitability to me about the way the book ended, that it had to end that way. Um, I'm not going to give away like all the other ideas. I don't know. I just find it weird to think that the other ways it might have ended. I mean, it could have ended anyway, couldn't it? Because this is fiction. But this to me seemed right. It seemed like this was where this is what Becker would have done. This is how he would have reacted to things. And and it was there was a sort of combination of circumstance that kind of pushed them in that direction. But it seems like the way it just seems kind of inevitable. Yeah, I think that's the only way. But even then, it was sad for me to write it because I didn't want because I liked Becca. I mean, I allowed there to be this kind of the blue light at the end, so that there's possible. If you're a very optimistic person, you can imagine that maybe somebody saved him.
Yeah, well, and somebody says, I'm really curious about what would happen to all the characters after Becca's death, especially Grace. So,
Well, exactly. What would
yeah.
Yeah, because she's going to have to come up with a story for this. But I imagine she would tell the police that he'd just driven off when the tide was coming in and got caught. Because we know that that's happened before. It's mentioned earlier, so that that people could. And yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if it's not written down, it hasn't happened. So we have no we yeah anything could have happened. That's
Anything
one
happen?
of
Well, if we want anything happening in the Q&A, we want you to be dropping your questions into the Q&A because I have one more thing I'm going to share, and then our voice of God, Tom Donadio, is going to be sharing what he sees in the Q&A. I love this one because it's going to tie exactly into something you just said. So our readers are on your track. Dottie Powers from Hot Springs, Arkansas wrote, please ask Paula if the blue lights at the end meant emergency vehicles were on their way, I hope. So,
I mean, I think again we don't know for sure because all we know is what he saw and he saw blue light. But I think that is a safe assumption that somebody has alerted someone to the fact that this car is on the causeway and the tide is coming in. And now we don't know whether they're going to get to him in time or. But yes, that is definitely the blue light at the end. Yeah.
there is the ending of the film. There's the ending of the film. We've done it. We've done it. Okay. We don't have beginning. We don't have that whole setup, but at the end, we're doing the pullback shot. We see
Yeah.
the part. Okay. Look, look, we could just go write it now because we know that part. We're from there. What could it be? How hard could it be? How difficult? Is there a film deal? I usually don't like to ask that, but is there at this point or?
Nope, there's no deal in place.
That's shocking.
So yes, if there are any film producers out there, the rights are available.
Do you know what? It's really interesting is because there are not that many sets and they're really looking for things without that many locations these days because they want to not have to like build and build and build and build. So you
Yeah,
think about it. It's like the road goes in, the road goes out.
exactly. I think it would be very atmospheric, but yeah, no, I would love to see it made, but
I think we just have to have
we shall see.
well, let them go out. Your agents should go out and say, look, there are very few locations. So I think this one
Yeah, it's cheap.
that's what they're doing. Yeah, that's what they're doing these days. I was watching the woman in cabin 10 the other day. I was like, it's one ship. Look, think about how few sets that actually was,
Yeah.
So there you go. Okay, Tom, do we have questions from our brilliant audience?
Yes, we do. First question is from Barbara. She wants to know, is Grace on the spectrum?
Hmm.
I mean, I did not diagnose her. She is not diagnosed herself. She is she's in her 60s now, and I feel like she's the kind of person, despite being a doctor, would be resistant to actually going and having we hear that she's been in therapy when she's much younger after a particular trauma and she has a breakdown. But she, the fact because she's not diagnosed, I'm not going to give her a diagnosis. But I don't think you're wrong in seeing that there are certain traits of hers that might lead us to in that direction. But I'm not going to give her a diagnosis. I would rather not. If I'm going to give somebody a direct diagnosis, I think they need to be actually diagnosed in the novel as well. And I felt like she's the sort of character. She's from a generation and a kind of person who would be very resistant to that kind of thing. So I deliberately didn't go down that route.
Mm.
The question from Jill, do you ever get so stuck that you are out of ideas or feel you can't finish a novel? And if so, what do you do?
I mean, I have been stuck. It's not, well, I don't tend to run out of ideas. I tend to sort of sometimes write myself down into a cul-de-sac, into a blind alley. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I'm stuck now. I don't know which way to go. And I did, as I said earlier, I did love writing this novel, but in most novels, there's usually a point where I sit at my desk and cry because it isn't working and I don't know what to do and it's awful. And I think at that point, you just have to get up and walk away
Mhm.
and go and read things you love, go for long walks. I just get in the bath and read because I always seem to have ideas when I'm in the bath. But anyway, and then maybe somehow in your subconscious things will start to unlock and you'll see which direction you should turn in. But it's not always the case. I have had one novel that I abandoned when I kept writing the first kind of third of it and then just couldn't find a way to take it forward. And I eventually just ripped that up. And well, but when you rip something up, I don't think it's necessarily you can't see that as time wasted because you almost always salvage something from that, and there has been a learning experience there anyway. But it's still pretty painful.
Mhm.
So it's not a pleasant feeling, but I think that's what tends to happen to me. It's not that I don't have ideas, it's that I just can't see my way clear to how I navigate my way through a particular bit of a story.
Mhm.
Mhm. Now, speaking of reading, we have a question from an anonymous attendee who wants to know who are your favorite authors and what are you reading now? And another question from Jill, what book have you read recently that you love?
Okay. I have tons of favorites. I'm a big fan of the British writer Kate Atkinson, who writes she writes literary fiction, sort of historical literary fiction, but also she has a crime series with a private detective called Jackson Brady. They are very they are sort of literary crime novels, but I absolutely love the way she writes. She's very funny. She creates wonderful characters. They're these really intricate plots that just fit together beautifully. So she's one of my favorites. I I have to take pictures of all the books I've read recently, otherwise I will forget them. Um, I read a very good crime novel that's not out yet, so that's annoying actually. So I won't tell you that one. I've just read the latest in the Slow Horses series. I don't know if you know that. It's
Yeah,
Mick
Nick Herron.
Herron's
Nick Herron.
Clown Town,
Yes.
which is very, very good. I've read a literary novel called Helm by Sarah Hall, who's another one of my favorites.
Mhm.
There's a book that's going to be out next year. It's called Good People by Padmina Sabit, which I think lots of people are going to be talking about. It's about an Afghan family that moved to the United States in the 1990s, and it's about the kind of the immigrant experience. There is also a crime in it. It's really well done. It's very clever and original, and I think lots of people are going to be talking about that next year. That's my
Mm.
prediction. Yeah.
Fun. It's fun to
Great,
read
thank
ahead, but
you.
can't you wait for everybody to catch up with you? I mean, there's times when I'm reading something ahead and I'm like, okay, how
Oh
many
yeah.
months before everybody's going to be
I know.
talking
I need to talk to someone about this book kind of thing.
right now we need to be having this conversation, or I need to write down
Yeah.
how I feel right now for when you catch up, Yeah.
We have a question from Linda. Is there a formula you engage to create suspense and even anxiety around what comes next? Or does it evolve uniquely out of the context of what's happening in the story as it unfolds?
think for me, it definitely comes out of the context. There's no formula really that I can think of. I think there are ways of, I guess, of like leaving chapters on, you can have this way of ending a chapter in a particular on a particular note that will make the reader go, oh God, okay, I've just got to read a few more pages then,
Oh, yeah.
and that kind of thing. But generally, when it comes to sort of that suspense, I was thinking when I was writing this novel, I had been reading some of Daphne du Maurier short stories, some of which I've mentioned in the book. And she does this thing where you're just a bit on edge all the time because you know that something bad is coming, but you're not entirely sure which direction it's coming from. And that was something that I definitely tried to emulate and to create in this book, this feeling of something is off. Someone is, but we're not exactly sure where. So that means that the reader's always slightly on the edge of their seat because they don't really know where the danger's coming from. And I think that was, so it's more about creating an atmosphere of general suspense that comes from the environment, from the house, from the characters, from all kinds of different angles. Um, and I think that will be different from book to book. In other books, it's very much on the situation or something. When I think back to The Girl on the Train, that was much more kind of pacey, and um, you were reading and reading to find out what was going to happen next in a slightly different way because it was you were kind of being propelled through this story by the desperation to find something. But this is a slightly different way of creating suspense. So I think for me, it is very much dependent on the context and the characters and the situations that they're in.
I know that sometimes when I'm reading Sherry LaPena's books, I tell her she's the one sit read because as I'm reading,
Yeah, you've got to just
she
yeah
finishes the chapter with something that you've got to turn that page and you're not
yeah.
going to sleep because you're going to keep reading to figure out what's going on. And I was like, oh my gosh, you did it again. And she says, that's my job. My job is to make sure you don't stop. And I was like, it's one strategy.
Yeah.
Looks like this will be the last question in the Q&A. Mary Lou asks, any chance of a sequel?
Oh, I would never say never to anything. It's certainly not something that I'm thinking about right now. Um, when I think of a story, even though sometimes my novels don't have neat endings, in fact, they rarely do have like everything tied up. I tend to think of them as like a complete story, and for me, that story is closed now, and I'm moving on. I do sometimes go back and think about the characters and think, oh, I wonder what happened to so and so. Where would they be now? Um, it's often the minor characters. That in the second crime novel I wrote, Into the Water, there were a lot of sort of minor characters, and I often think like, oh, I'd love to go back to her story because I don't feel like I really finished her. But anyway, I don't tend to think in terms of sequels. However, I will say I wouldn't say, oh, absolutely, would never do that because maybe in a few years' time, I think, oh, actually, I'd love to go back to the island and see what's going on with Grace. But no, I'm not promising anything right now.
It's go back and visit a character more like the place,
Yeah.
but also where are they now? Like where,
Yeah, a bit of the what happened. I mean, I don't think I would do it with like a protagonist, probably, but one of the minor ones.
yeah, a secondary character, like where could we go and,
Yeah.
make their story bigger. And it may be somebody, there's a book that I could talk about right now, but I would be giving something away and it recently just came out.
Oh.
And there's this there's this moment, and I'll drop you out and tell you what book it is, but there's this moment where all of a sudden you realize it's intertwined with something else. And you did pick
I
up
love
on it
that.
at the beginning.
I
And
love that.
it's really the last line of the book. And it's like
Oh.
people sit there and go, oh, that's what happened. That's who that person is. It's this like
Oh.
wake up moment. And it's playing a lot of times, but when you get to that, it's a super satisfying thing because you're like,
Mm.
wait a second now, that does dovetail into the other book. That does dovetail into who this other person was. But it's not the kind of thing that this author set out planning to write, or they were writing something completely different. And then
Mm.
I think I'm just going to go start writing this. And then it ended up to be that. And I think that's the kind of thing where people say, well, what are you going to do next? Or what are you going to do? And it's like, well, I don't know what I'm going to surreptitiously fall upon tomorrow when I'm in the food store buying oranges or something. And I'm going to see
Yeah.
somebody doing something. And there goes the story. So
Mm.
are you playing around with something now? Or are you just doodling on paper? Or
Oh no, I'm writing. I'm way into it. I'm very bad at talking about work in progress, so I
It's
won't
okay.
give you
You
any
don't have to.
details because, but I am, I'm a good chunk of the way in. It's it's finding its shape now. So yeah, it's good.
Once it finds its shape, does it pick up? Like, do you pick up, or is it still, you still have to go play?
I mean, again, it's not always the same for every novel. This novel, I think, has been it hasn't been the most straightforward. The Blue Hour, I kind of once I knew, once I found this idea of the bone, I kind of I saw where I was going. It was really nice. I knew what I wanted to do, and then was really on a roll. Sometimes they're a bit more meandering, and this one is being a bit more meandering. But I'm getting there. I am getting there, and I should now be hitting my stride. But I seem to have had a lot of interruptions lately. But anyway, that's
What
just life.
what's the like? Life gets in the way. There's times that
Yeah.
just life gets in the way of whatever you're doing, and you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, here I'm going to get.
Yeah.
I'm planning to do this today. There's times when I sit there and look at what I was going to do today, and I said I did one thing. I guess I should be happy. I got one thing done.
Yeah, as long as you can tick one thing off, yeah,
I think we have to reward ourselves more. I think, I really think that since the pandemic, we're really hard on ourselves because we did, like, during that time, everything slowed down so much that now we feel like we have to be on double time to make up for that year, that 18 months that we didn't. And I feel like everybody just like, okay, let's take a deep breath. It's really going to be okay. Halloween is coming. Think about your costume and your candy. I put the pumpkins up in the windows the other day. I haven't done that in a couple of years, but there's some new little kids in the neighborhood. And I said, okay, now we've got to go put the pumpkins back up so that there's something going on. So, Tom, we're out of questions from our fabulous audience. Tom, we're out
Yeah,
of
looks like we are. Yep, that wraps up the Q&A.
Paula, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for
Thank
staying up late.
you.
We totally appreciate you. And we hope to see you next time. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you so much. This has been really fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Great.
much, Paula.
Thanks
Thank
so much.
you.
Okay, we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Thanks, everyone.
And to everybody else, let's just see. We've got a couple of announcements about what's coming up. Tonight's event will be available on YouTube and on our podcast soon, and we will alert you when that is live. We also have created a new events page, which is on tbrnetwork.com, where you can sign up for all of our programs. For November, our Bookaccino Live book group will be held on Wednesday, November 19th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That means that anybody who's working has to like cheat or take lunch at that time. Okay, I'm just saying this. And the reason we're doing that is because our guest is going to be the author of Broken Country, Claire Leslie Hall, and she's joining from the UK. And unlike Paula, she doesn't stay up late at night. So I was asking her, I said, don't you want to stay up till 1 a.m.? And she said, not really. So she has like a firm, like, I'm not going to be doing this till 1 o'clock in the morning. So our 8 o'clock is their one. So she's going to be doing 2 o'clock in the afternoon with us. Are also in that discussion when I talked to her about Broken Country, there are two books, just so our readers know, that have come out that are prequels. Well, they're not prequels, they're books that she wrote earlier. And one is called Pictures of Him, and the other one, Tom, can you just remind me, because I'm so bad with titles, as you know.
No problem. Days You Were Mine.
Days You Were Mine. Both of those, as well as Broken Country, are bets ons of mine. They're both out in trade paperback. Simon & Schuster recently bought the rights and is publishing them. They're out now. So it's been a very rare moment when you had an author where there were 3 books out from that author within 1 year. One was like their new book, and the others were 2 that they had written earlier. So I think it'd be a lot of fun for you to be able to, take a look at that. In Pictures of Him, I will tell you there are bones of what's in Broken Country. So if you loved Broken Country, I highly suggest you take a look at that as well. I'm also, by the next time we do this, going to try and figure out how this camera is not going to go in and out. There's something new that they just did. It's driving me crazy. Our next November Bookaccino Live book preview event is going to be Wednesday, November 12th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you sign up for events at Book Report Network newsletter, you will never miss an event. And a reminder, we have more than 230 Book Reporter Talks to Author interviews available on our YouTube channel, including an earlier interview that I did with Paula. And those are available on the Book Report Network on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We thank you so much for joining us tonight. Nights like this are special for us, especially when we get an author like Paula who's going to spend time with us and share thoughts about her work. And when you contribute such great questions that really make the night even more special. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Now go off and read something fun. Okay, thank you so much now.